Hi everybody, this is Joshua Kirk back with you guys once again on YouTube. And now it's time for episode 49 of Album of the Day. And before I get into today's review, I would just like to talk about the shirt I'm wearing in this review. I'm wearing a Neutral Milk Hotel t-shirt that my parents and I bought at the concert that we saw them at, in Merriweather in Columbia, Maryland. And another thing I'd like to cover is that I would like to thank all of you for being able to donate to the MDA walk that's going on in April. So I'd like to thank all of you for donating for the MDA muscle walk that goes on in April, because the money will help me and some other kids with muscular dystrophy get to camp this year. But anyway, aside from those two things, let's get on to the review. Today's band is an artist who started out as just a solo project of singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Ben Gibbard. It originally started out as a solo project from Bellingham, Washington, just outside of Seattle, made out of singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Ben Gibbard, and then it's evolved from a solo project into a full band. The band is called Def Cab for Cutie, and they really are, they really are one of the most popular indie bands, working in music today. They exploded on the scene in 2003 with their album Transatlanticism, which is on independent label Barsuck Records, which is from Seattle. That's also released the work of people like What Made Milwaukee Famous, John Vanderslice, and people like that. So I'm here to review Def Cab for Cutie's third album, released on October 9th in 2001. The album is called The Photo Album. And first of all, here's the cover of the album. The spine, the other spine, and the back of the album. So the songs on here are Steadier Footing, A Movie Script Ending, We Laugh Indoors, Information Travels Faster, Why You'd Want to Live Here, Blacking Out the Friction, I Was a Kaleidoscope, Styrofoam Plates, Coney Island, and Debate Exposes Doubt. And this is released on Seattle independent label Barsuck Records that I just mentioned. They're now signed with a major label, which is Atlantic Records, but Barsuck does release some of their later records on vinyl. And these guys were going to release a new album on the 31st called Kintsugi, which I'm really excited about. I have heard the first single on that album, Black Sun. It's a good song, so I'm looking forward to the new album. And it's their first album without Chris Walla producing. Chris Walla has always produced the band's records. It has always been such a big part of the band as a member. But Chris Walla recently left the band in late 2014. But I heard Chris Walla still does contribute to, Kintsugi, but it's the first record the band has done with an outside producer, which is Rich Costey, who's worked with people like Fiona Apple and Muse and people like that. And to show you the inside of the album. It's got really cool photos and the lyrics on it. Let me give you a closer look at this. The funny thing is that, you know, the lyrics aren't exactly, like, listed in order of when the songs appear. You know, that's kind of weird. And, of course, also in there, there's, like, the credits of who played what in there. Which, a lot of that shows up on, like, Def Cab's earlier records, but on their later albums, doesn't show their instrument roles. Then there's the track listing and, you know, the other credits. Like, not exactly the instrument credits, but you know the drill. And then it also has a promo in here for other Def Cab CDs. Translanticism, which is probably my second favorite Def Cab album. The photo album, the one I'm reviewing today. Something About Airplanes, which is probably my third favorite Def Cab album. Classic right there. The Stability EP, which I don't have that, but that includes a 13-minute track called Stability, along with a Bjork cover of All Is Full of Love. And then there's We Are the Facts and We're Voting Yes, which is my favorite Def Cab album for sure. It sounds great on vinyl, so I'm definitely going to review that one day, probably. You can play these songs with chords, which is basically like the 1997 tape that Ben Gibbard put out with a bunch of other rarities and, you know, extra tracks on it. And the Forbidden Love EP, which contains the songs Photo Booth and Song for Kelly Huckabee, in which Photo Booth is like a pretty notable fan favorite. And then on the back it has promos for some later Def Cab albums released on Atlantic, released from Barsuck on vinyl. Narrow Stairs, Plans, and the Open Door EP, which basically just has songs from the same sessions as Narrow Stairs. And then there's the CD, which, you know, the CD, you know, is kind of, you know, plain, but, you know, it doesn't really need a whole lot of color in there, you know. And then there's like nothing underneath it. And I got the CD for my 14th birthday earlier this year, so I'm kind of a newcomer to Def Cab for Cutie, but, you know, I'm getting into their music, so, you know. Here you go. So that's the packaging for the photo album. So the opening song on this album is the song Steadier Footing, which isn't really as much of a song as it is more just an intro track. It's a short little minute and a half, you know, intro track that just features nothing more than just an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, this bass drum, this weird little like bass drum boom, and like some organ on there to add a little like extra flavor to it. Like this song, and right off the bat, you know, this song does have, you know, so some pretty moving like imagery in it, in the lyrics. Like, I think probably my favorite part of the record is probably the lyrics. So like right away you have like such moving imagery coming out of the song Steadier Footing, that like Ben is singing about. And like the thing, and like it features like imagery of things like watching drunks stumble forth into the night like while sitting on the front porch, and then other imagery of things like letting someone bum a smoke and things like that. So right off the bat, there's some moving imagery going on. Track number 2 is the fan favorite and the notable single by the band, A Movie Script Ending, which features like imagery of like a pretty sleepy, lonesome, and overall like pretty, crappy town. Like, talking about things like, things like, there's like, the CD bar, for example, that contains like, new bottoms on bar stools, but the people remain the same. But then there's like just prices inflating, and like imagery of like a pretty shallow town with things like air on railroad that's just making the same sounds. And then there's like shop fronts on Holly that are like dirty words which have like asterisks in for the vowels. So there's definitely like with the first 2 songs on this album, like right off the bat there's already some pretty moving and pretty intriguing imagery that isn't necessarily of good things, but just I like lyrics that evoke like imagery, and it kind of makes sense that this is called the photo album because like because when you listen to the lyrics you kind of picture all these like Polaroid pictures of different things, like not so positive things in life. So the photo album's like the perfect title for this album, because Polaroid photos are kind of a big part of the artwork of this album, but also like of like the aesthetic. Like the lyrics also kind of refer to that a little bit. And the song A Movie Script Ending is basically what you'd expect musically from a Def Cab song, 2 guitars. But then there's like one that sounds heavier and one that sounds lighter. Hence the liner notes of Ben Gibbert's dirty guitar and Chris Walla's clean guitar. And then there's also like one thing that sets it apart from Def Cab's early work is because the drums on this album, which are provided by Michael Shore, who was in the band for a pretty short time. Like the drums on this album sound a lot more abrasive and heavier. So you notice Def Cab's kind of doing something different with this album, because the drums sound a lot more abrasive on this album than they have on Def Cab's first 2 albums. And then there's also the use of an organ, which is like more like a bed in the background. And there is no bass on this song. Instead, it's just Nicholas Harmer doing some bass pedal stuff on there, which is also kind of way in the back as well. Track number 3 is called We Laugh Indoors, and this is, one song that a lot of, like, big fans, have definitely heard this song live at least once, because this is, yet again, another fan favorite. That's, and this is one song that's, like, performed, like, pretty frequently at the live shows. And there's just a really cool, like, drum groove. Like, Michael Shore always did those, like, pretty abrasive rhythms of, like, boom, 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 boom. He always did those, like, pretty, like, heavy rhythms on the drum kit. And then, coming in after just, that drum groove are some guitars. are some guitars, some bass, and then there's like Chris Walla using a bunch of like feedback effects with his guitar. Like basically at the beginning, you're just hearing him, you know, kind of doing like swirls of guitar feedback, like in the beginning of the song. And then of course, like one thing you notice about this record is that Ben Gibbard's vocal sounds more open and confident on this record than the first two albums by Def Cab. So like the vocal is one thing that's a big improvement for the band on this album. And then of course, you know, and then it has like imagery of things like, you know, gutter punks like Bumming Change and like, you know, things like that, and you like, you know, and you kind of picture that like outside an apartment, so there's like imagery of an apartment room, like a rather, you know, crappy apartment room is kind of one thing that the song kind of refers to quite a bit, hence the title, We Laugh Indoors. And then you're picturing things that are like going on outside, like the Bumming Change thing and stuff like that. And then of course in the bridge, Ben does this weird like distorted vocal, which really does add some emotion to some of the lyrics in the bridge, like the rather like, you know, urgent lyrics of "Don't you get me started now." It kind of makes sense that with urgent lyrics like that, Ben's voice is all distorted. I don't know what mic he was singing or what technique he was using, but you know, anyway, but you know, it really does, you know, work with the emotion of the lyrics in the bridge to have Ben's vocal all distorted in the bridge. Track number 4 is called Information Travels Faster, and this is kind of a melancholy, piano-driven song that has imagery of things like there's a lyric in there about like feeling lonely, waiting at a station, and then you come across things like dance hall hips, pretentious quips, and a boxer's bob and weave. So there's like imagery like that. Going on in the song, and Ben's piano playing on the song is just, you know, just beautiful, and you know, has this sort of like sad, lonely vibe to it, which is exactly what the song solely is kind of based on. So like there's some really nice piano on the song, for sure. Track number 5 is called Why You'd Want to Live Here, and this song, you know, definitely shows Def Cab going to a more like heavy rock side, I guess, like you know, and then there's like 2 guitar riffs going on at the same time on the song. There's like one riff on there that's like credited as a polite guitar, which is what Ben is playing, which is like, you know, kind of light and stuff. And then there's this other guitar riff on there played by Chris Walla, which is credited as a snotty guitar, which is like kind of angry and, you know, really distorted. I mean, like Chris Walla's guitar has a whole bunch of effects on it, so it's like really kind of, you know, naughty sounding on there. And then it has lyrics about like, you know, what goes on in a really shallow town, like you know, like the narrator in the song is like in Los Angeles in a rather like, you know, sleepy part of it, with things like in a cabin that like, you know, smells like jet fuel, which isn't such a pleasant smell, and then like asking a gas station employee if he's ever had trouble breathing, and then they just tell you things like, they don't really tell you the truth. They just say it varies from season to season, kid. And like, of course, you know, it's kind of a song about how people or something, like people or a town, kind of misunderstand you a little bit, and like, so like the narrator like is in Los Angeles, and the city thinks he might explode one day soon. So it's kind of a song about how, you know, people, you know, just kind of misunderstand you and then stereotype you. So, you know, so so it's kind of a song about just kind of misunderstanding somebody for who they are and stuff like that. So it's like definitely a town where you can't understand why people want to, you know, go to such, you know, seedy towns like that. So that's kind of why you'd want to live here is. So that's kind of why you'd want to live here is about. Oh, because yeah, it is true. You can't swim in a town this shallow, because you will most assuredly drown tomorrow. So why you'd want to live here? You know, it was one song that totally like just, you know, connects to me totally because the message is just so legitimate on there. Track number 6 is called Blacking Out the Friction, and it's based off of a nice little Fender Rhodes piano, which is accompanied by, you know, the basics, bass, drums, and electric guitars. And the song has some really nice backup vocals on there from John Vanderslice and Sean Nelson. Like John Vanderslice is singing like this rather low vocal, which goes really well with Ben Gibbard's voice. And then, you know, coming in, there's Sean Nelson singing like this higher backup vocal. So I think their voices, you know, go so well together on this song. And like John Vanderslice and Sean Nelson are like, you know, the only like special guests on this record, really. This is kind of a song about like probably my favorite lyric from the song would have to be the one lyric where Ben says let me look in the liner notes for that lyric. I think probably my favorite lyric on that song, Blacking Out the Friction, would have to be the lyric where Ben says, I think that it's brainless to assume that making changes to your Windows view will give a new perspective. Because, like, you know, that's like a totally legitimate, you know, lyric right there. So track number 7 on the album is I Was a Kaleidoscope, which is another single from this album. And that song, you know, is like, you know, one of my favorites on the album. Like, you know, just, you know, has some good, like, rhythm to it on there. Like that song has some good rhythm to it from like the guitar on there, and it's kind of a song about how you're kind of walking in kind of this wintry phase, and then like you know, there's this person in your life that isn't right for you. So it's kind of a song about how it kind of feels like winter when you're like taking steps to someone's apartment or something like. So it's kind of a song about how, you know, just, you know, when you feel down, you know, things kind of feel like winter to you, So they kind of use like lyrics about like winter and things like that, and kind of turn it into like metaphors in there. It's not really a literal thing. It's kind of more metaphor in there. So it's kind of a play on words a little bit with that song. And like, so it's kind of a song about how kind of this wintry kind of phase, you know, where you're like cold and helpless, can kind of turn you into some sort of kaleidoscopic feature, pretty much. And then like in the middle of the song, it gets a little psychedelic with the use of an echoey piano played by Ben Gibbard on there. My favorite track on the album is probably the 8th song on the album, which is Styrofoam Plates. It has, you know, lyrics about, like, you know, this guy who, you know, obviously, you know, obviously, of course, kind of like, you know, so like that song kind of incorporates a little religious lyrics into it, like the first verse in the song is about, like, you know, kind of, like the first verse of the song kind of talks about, like throwing someone's ashes to see after someone dies, and then, like, you know, a gust blows the ashes backwards. And then the narrator's thinking about how this guy, you know, wasn't really a father, but like kind of a donor of seeds to a single mother, and then the second line kind of talks about how the guy as a 13-year-old, like in the Catholic Church, you know, during Thanksgiving dinner, like and like seeing how charity reeks of like cheap wine and pity and things like that. And then in that verse, Ben talks about, like, you know, servers wearing crosses to, like, you know, shield from the sufferance, you know, plaguing the others. And then Ben mentions how he thinks of this guy, like, every year, when he counts his blessings and wonders what he and him are, like, you know, doing here. And then in the middle of it, there's this, like, just really moving guitar riff that has just, you know, such a nice rhythm on it that's just really, so like, the lead guitar on the song just sounds great on here. And then the third verse is about, like, you know, how, you know, the narrator won't join the procession. That's, like, speaking their piece, and, like, talking about how this guy's, like, a disgrace to the concept of family. So this is kind of a song about, like, how, you know, how people tend to, like, you know, kind of, so it's kind of like, so it's kind of about basically how, like, people kind of tend to misunderstand kind of the God and religion kind of concept a little bit. So that's kind of, you know, what the song has to, you know, do with. So like, there's, like, some really good guitar on this song, and plus some really, like, you know, and plus some really moving lyrics too. So like, you know, so like that song definitely does keep my attention wide open for sure. And, like, besides Ben Gibbard's, like, really good guitar on the song, there's, like, bass, drums, and then Chris Walla doing a bunch of weird things on there, like he does play guitar on the song, but, like, he plays it with, like, you know, this heavy, like, tremolo effect on it, so it's, like, really droney in there. And then there's, like, a bunch of, like, swelling, like, guitar noise, like, at the end, that could have easily been, like, taken out of the mix, but it kind of makes sense. The band left it there for sure. And then there's, like, some nice piano on the song too, playing these really, like, light notes that feel right at home for the song. Track number 9 is probably the weirdest, most psychedelic song on the whole album, Coney Island. So this song definitely just shows the band, like, diving into psychedelics for the first time. Like, there's a bunch of loops and effects on it and things like that. Like, there's this really cool, listenable drum loop on it, along with this backwards piano at the beginning. And then coming in, there's the simple guitar riffs, and then some piano, which feels just right for that song, because the song would have been missing some oomph without the piano and those loops going on that song. And then coming in, there's some bass, drums, and then there's also the use of shaker and tambourine on there, which are both played by Michael Shore on there. There isn't much to the lyrics. It basically kind of mentions imagery of there's not much to the lyrics. In fact, it's a pretty short song, so it kind of makes sense right there. So it kind of talks about the narrator sitting on a carousel ride without music or lights, and it's kind of imagery of Coney Island, everything at Coney Island closed and everything. So there's definitely some kind of sort of closed carnival imagery on that song that I'm picturing on there. And then of course it's a cool song that has a lot of interesting stuff going on there, especially those loops and that extra percussion going on in that song. That drum loop is just really addictive to listen to. It's that drum loop is just so listenable in my opinion. Which of course is Michael Shore looping his own drums. So that's a cool drum loop on there, by the way. And then it closes with the song "Debate Exposes Doubt," and yeah, I really do think this is a perfect way to close the album, because it certainly does kind of feel like the end of the album for sure. I really like closers that feel like it's the end of the album, and not just it doesn't have to be some closer that doesn't feel like a closer. It can just be a closer that just feels like the end of the story pretty much. This song has talks about repetition that starts to thin the meaning of things, and then everything gets frighteningly still as people enter and intersect the floor, and it's kind of that thing so it's kind of the thing where you always try to choke a stare at perfection that others would just kill something for them for. So it's kind of a song about kind of exposure of how when a exposure of doubt then that debate can cause. So it's a pretty legitimate title for the song, and that song is just so beautiful, that organ at the end accompanying the guitars, bass, and drums, that organ at the end is just so beautiful on there. And then of course there's some nice little piano from Chris Walla at the end as well. So the keyboard sounds on the song just sound so beautiful, like the organ and the piano on there. So this album, lyrically, it's definitely a very compelling listen lyrically, and musically it shows Def Cab kind of trying a bunch of new things that they hadn't done before. For example, Coney Island's kind of the first time they've used loops and stuff like that. So that's definitely very brave of the band to try something new, psychedelics on a song like Coney Island right there. And and plus there's like at the beginning of Debate Exposes Doubt, there's like some like looped drumming like at the beginning of the song. So it shows them kind of like, you know, trying a bunch of things that, you know, that like weren't there before, and plus the drums have a more abrasive sound and have like kind of like I swear the drums probably have a different setup and like different like textures going on. Like on Information Travels Faster, there's like, I'm hearing like a drum kit with a different texture with like a tambourine on it. So like, you know, they definitely do jump into like new territories, which I think is very like, you know, lavish and very brave of the band to do something like that. And like and vocally it sounds even better than before on this album than on the first two records. I mean, if you just listen to Def Cab's first two albums, Airplanes and We Have the Facts, Ben's vocal sounds a lot more whisper, kind of quiet on there. Not exactly like this, but more like this on there. But here on this album, like, Ben really does sound more confident with his vocal on here. So like like there's a big difference in the vocal on this album than in the first two Def Cab records. So I'm gonna give this album an 8 out of 10. Although Def Cab for Cutie isn't my favorite band. In fact, there are definitely better bands out there in my opinion. Like Def Cab is, you know, definitely a band that's kind of straightforward indie rock for the most part, even if they try something new. But I still really like this album, and Def Cab still has some good music, so, you know, so that's my review of the Photo album. I'll see you for episode 50.